Hey guys, welcome. Today we are gonna make a little bag, little keepsake bag, little trinket bag. I sell a lot of them as dice bags too. Depending on, you can see at the top there, I've got some fabric ready to go with the dragon scales up there. But the main one in the video is going to feature this cute, like light teal color that I'm using to make the exterior of the bottom of the small bag. And you can see I've got cut two written on there, so I don't forget I need to cut two of these bottom pieces. I typically make the same project over and over and over. Once I find something I like, I stick with it. So my patterns, I usually kind of make my own like really durable ones that have my right like cut markings and stuff on there and stand up to being reused. You can see the one up in the corner. I cut into it a little bit, so I had to patch it back together with some, I just used washi tape and I thought it was cute. As you can see, I am saving those scraps. Sometimes I spend a silly amount of time on organizing the leftovers that maybe I should just throw away. And here on this spot, you can see I've abandoned my rotary cutting scissors for these littler ones to get this smaller detail here. But these little tiny pieces right here, I don't know what I'm ever going to do with them, but I have saved every single one. The pile of these little tiny matching rectangles is ginormous. Honestly, that might be kind of fun. If you guys have any ideas on what to do with a scrap that small, like maybe pop it in the comments. This is the part I'm super excited for you guys to see. Yeah, you can see. It is this cute flamingo fabric is an old t-shirt that I got on clearance from somewhere for like $1. It was obviously way too big for me. I was never going to wear it, but I got it with the intent of making one of these bags out of it. And so right here, just lining it up, cutting off the excess at the bottom, right? The part that's already been sewn and whatnot, so I can get a smooth, crisp edge to line my pattern up with. And I love the cutting mat I have in the back because it has those dark and light gray squares that kind of help you measure things out, right? And obviously, the best advice to ever follow when it comes to cutting patterns: measure twice, cut once. This is a fun part too because I am lining up the middle of the piece with the seam on the edge of the shirt. It has a cute little tag on it that I'll kind of show you progress around it throughout the video. But got both of those cut right there. You can see, super easy, just sew them together. I love videos close up on the needle. And ironing, one of the most critical steps in any sewing project. Yes, you think you can skip ironing, but you can't. Okay, so here I am just lining up the pieces that we've already sewn together. The seam right here where they line up is much more, it's the only piece of this step that is important. All the edges are going to get sewn up inside the bag. You won't see them, but this piece, this seam where like the 4 different corners of the fabric, right where I've got those pins at, where those all line up together is one of the most important things, because that's, when I look at bags and stuff, like that's what I look at, is to see how well did all those seams come together. So that is where I start from this step. And from here, I am just matching the pins out to the little markings that I've got on the pattern. I almost said stencil. It's the same, but the little markings I've got on the pattern, so I know where to start and stop my sewing stitches here on the next step when we sew all this together. All right, so I've got the lining pinned in exactly the same way, and here we go. We're gonna sew. Always be careful to take that pin out or make sure you're sewing around it so you don't break your needle. Nothing worse than breaking your needle, it being your last needle, and your whole project is at an absolute stop so you can make it to the store. And I always backstitch over that end because I know these seams are going to be the ones that end up getting the most wear and tear. They're the bottom of the bag where you're like digging your hands and stuff when you use it. So backstitch all those. right, so we've got those ones all done. You can see like flip the opposite ends together. I used to use the markings on the pattern to know where to sew, but I have had so much more success doing it this way and going off of what actually happened versus where the pattern says I should. My bags turn out a lot more even that way. So I just sewed those lines up the straight same way. I always like put a lot of stress on these corners and stuff right here because if there is something wrong and that stitch work didn't like get all the way through, if there's going to be a hole or something, I want to know about it right now when I'm making it so I can fix it now instead of it happening down the road when it's in a customer's hand. And I unpick that, loosen the tension there so that when you turn it around, you don't have to deal with those threads pulling on each other, on themselves. And then make sure the both right sides, the inside of the lining and the outside of the bag, are what are facing each other right now, because we are going to sew the lining to the exterior. I like to line up the seams opposite of each other to kind of distribute the bulk of the inside of the bag around all the edges instead of having them lined up on each side, because then you end up with two sides of the bag that are kind of bulky and two that are like super thin. So make sure those oppose each other. And I just do a couple marking pins here to kind of keep it lined up, but not so many that they're in the way. You can see I finished that circle all the way around. Now I'm going to use the hole we left in the edge of the lining to turn the bag inside out. I usually just start with the most bulky part and get it going. From there, it's pretty easy work to just keep pulling out through that hole and turn the entire bag inside out. Again, I don't worry about being too rough because if it can't stand up to this little bit of force, it's not going to stand the test of time. And I am in the business of making family heirlooms, so I want to know that it can handle it. We are all nice and turned in and out now. There was that tag I told you I was excited about. Ironing, do not skip ironing. I go all the way around and get that entire edge nice and crisp so that for this step here, when I do the finishing top stitch, it is nice and easy and looks really good. This is the part most people are going to visually notice every time they use the bag. Do a little back stitch over the part where the drawstring is going to have a lot of wear and tear on it. And so that one was kind of just for show, so it looks cute. These next two circles, oh, you can see I enlisted my son to help hold the phone right here while I'm sewing. He said that his fingers in there are just fine because a lot of YouTubers make content from home. But as you can see, I've got two more steps, two more circles, two more passes of stitches right here that will ultimately create the channel that the drawstrings are going to go through. All right, so finish those up. You can see that one turned out beautiful. The one before it on the other side of the bag was a little rough. The cleaner you keep your project as you move through, the easier it is. So right here, I am just snipping off all the extra threads and whatnot that, you know, make their way on there as you are sewing. But yeah, you can see this one right here. That channel is a little rough. The weight of the t-shirt fabric was a lot lighter, a lot thinner than the cotton contrast that I used on the bottom and the lining. So it was kind of hard to keep the two fabrics going at the same pace as I was spinning those circles around. But right here, I am getting ready to sew in the tags that I put in all the bottom of them. Super cute. I just had these little ribbon logo signature tags made from a shop on Etsy. Super easy to work with, and I love how they turn out because they are just nice and classic on the inside of my bags. My aunt taught me how to thread a needle that way, how to knot the needle, I guess. So it's funny because the first several bags I made like this, I used a machine to sew this tag in, and they don't look bad. but I thought that it would be too time consuming, too monotonous, too hard to do it by hand. And one time I ended up with needing to do a bag, and I didn't have access to my sewing machine. So I said, all right, fine, I'll hand stitch it. And gosh dang it, the hand stitching took so much less effort, so much less time, and it turned out looking so much better than using the machine that sure enough I hand stitch every one now. And I kind of like how that goes along with my signature and stuff right there on the little tag. I noticed right about here when I got to the actual ribbon that I was doing the wrong stitch. But I left it for the video so you guys can see that things don't have to be perfect. You know, you can just have fun doing them, or sometimes the little mistakes like that are what gives it the character and the uniqueness, the special ingredient of handmade. But yeah, you can see the way that I've done the first half of the stitching. You can see the white thread. You can see it like kind of as that running stitch showing up on both sides, versus right here as I hit the other side of the ribbon and come out into just the blue. It's now an invisible stitch and you will not be able to see the rest of the white stitches as I go. And then I've also gone back and forth too on whether to hide this finishing knot or not. And ultimately, I usually decide to leave it out for everything I just said about handmade things. Sometimes if you do too good of a job and it looks professional, then that is also feedback for the handmade business that it looks like you couldn't have done it by hand. So sometimes I do leave stuff like that out. Plus I like the contrast of, look how cute this white thread looks with the with the teal, but it kind of picks up on the white on the flamingo fabric too. And then this is just another one I had done where you can see a little bit thicker thread. The whole thing turned out so nice compared to my blue one we're working on here in the video. So turn it all back how it's going to look. And now we are ready to add the drawstrings, bring it all together. So when I am getting ready, I kind of have this the previous scrap of drawstring that I use from other bags that has some tape on it to make it somewhat of a needle, right? You saw I just put a little piece of tape on there to hold it on to help thread this new drawstring through the bag. And I pull it all the way straight. I leave myself a nice length that I know I'm going to need to tie the knots and stuff on there. Cut those even. And repeat the process for the other side. So bring it to the other side of the bag and skip this hole right there so that it comes out on the opposite side. Just like that. And then I use the one that I've already cut as my guide so that they match each other regardless of what original intent was. Now the whole bag is the right length for itself. And then I just do a regular knot, but instead of stopping at like one circle around, I bring it around 2 or 3 more times, depending on what I want this knot to look like. Because I think it turns out kind of cute. It looks a little bit more unique, a little bit more original than just a basic regular knot. But then right here, I use both drawstrings to do just a regular knot, but it's got 2 strings, so it looks a little cuter. The whole thing altogether has a nice vibe to it. And then exactly the same process on the other side of the bag. And then I always fray the edges, fray the ends of the little drawstrings. Kind of gives it that finishing touch of, because they're going to fray on their own eventually anyways, right? So having them pre-frayed and cut right here so they match makes it part of the original design. And there you go, guys. That is how I do it. That's how I put one of these cute little bags together. We'll follow the link in my homepage to my Etsy shop where I sell these. If you don't want to make one yourself, you can just buy one. Have a good day, guys.